Property Investor Roundtable that I like to do, and it should be firing up now on all cylinders. And so what I do is cover the news and events and the Property Investor. Oh, there we go. We are online. So welcome to the Property Investor Roundtable. This is my weekly live stream that I like to do. And the idea behind it is to just cover the latest real estate property related news and events. And the idea is that at some point in the future, you will, you'll learn from just hearing the different updates, what's going on, and my take on the way the market is viewing the different bits of news. At the moment, it seems to be housing and the mortgage rates and all that seem to be all what it's all about. But let me kick on anyway with this. And I do this every Wednesday at 1 o'clock. That is 1 o'clock Ireland, UK time. If you happen to be watching it, this is a lunch and learn, as you might call it. If you're in the US, obviously it's 8 a.m. in the morning. If you're in New York City, so you might call it a breakfast briefing. I call it the Property Investor Roundtable. And today's agenda is really just real estate news. And I'm going to throw open the floor to anyone who has any questions that they'd like to ask. So real estate news. I always go straight to the property sector, which is a page in the Financial Times. And the Financial Times is a great newspaper just for kind of global updates on what's going on. If you look at what's going on in the world of real estate kind of across the globe, you can often get hints as to where the Irish market might be going, because usually the Irish market would trail what other markets are doing. And so typically what I would look at is what's happening in America, because, you know, if America catches a cold, the rest of the world gets pneumonia. And at the moment, we are looking at UK house prices. They're saying that the mortgage rates on 5-year fixed rates in the last while, there has been complete chaos in the UK market. And the UK market, primarily because Liz Truss went in, they dropped the ball with their sort of mini budget that they created. The whole market kind of like tipped end over end, and she had to resign after firing her Chancellor of the Exchequer, and the whole thing was a big mess. Along came Rishi Sunak, who has stabilized the market with his Chancellor, and it has meant that austerity is in for the UK, all sorts of stuff. But what it has done is stabilized interest rates, which I think was what they were hoping to achieve. Because if you didn't achieve that, what you're looking at is total chaos and possible kind of wipeout of the UK economy. So now what you've got is people are looking ahead 5 years, and 5 years from now, mortgage rates are starting to stabilize. So they're able to fix those 5-year rates, and the rates are actually coming down. So whereas before people were anticipating the rates continuing to go up, they're now sort of seeing that stability is coming back after the austerity budget. They're now sort of reckoning that 5 years from now, we should be back under a little bit of a bit more control, at least. Commercial property values are tumbling, and that is because lenders are retreating. Spooked lenders are retreating from the market, and the outlook for the industry has darkened as the rates rise faster than expected. So what happens, usually there's a little bit of stability and you can kind of see where rates are going. This last kind of, say, 2-month period has been so kind of shocking to the system that what it's done is it's just thrown so many businesses under the bus. A lot of businesses that had expected to go a certain way have had to completely reverse. People are being laid off left, right, and center. Housing demand has dropped off a cliff. You've got big PLC house building companies announcing that things have dropped off, and the rates, just the ability for them to predict what the future holds is getting more and more difficult. And so it is one of those things that it causes certain segments of the market to really go into a bit of a difficult spin. So that is what's happened. And a lot of people are now looking at commercial property prices falling by as much as 30%. And what that is going to do is that will push a lot of the pension providers and the big pension funds to start to restructure their portfolio. And so probably you're going to see big assets being dumped on the market by these guys, because they have the way it works with pension funds, they'll have mandates for a certain structure of their portfolio. So they'll have, say, 30% office, 30% industrial, 30% commercial retail, we'll say. Let's just say that was the split. And if the office market was to tumble, then that split is no longer, like, the value of the portfolio has gone down in the office sector. And so they'll have to rebalance that, because the other ones will look larger as a comparison. So they'll have to buy offices, even though the prices have fallen, they'll have to buy offices to pump that up, or they'll have to dump something on the other side. And so that is how it has, these rebalancing kind of things can create opportunity. Now, England's stock of office space has fallen the fastest in the last 20 years. And primarily that is because of the pandemic. With the pandemic, you had this situation where people really, a lot of people working from home, this hybrid work system that is still, the jury is still out. A lot of people are still wondering what to think of it, because certain companies, it's doing very well. Other companies, it's an absolute disaster in terms of culture, in terms of staff attrition. If you're sitting at home working in your kitchen table and somebody sort of offers you an extra $5,000 a year, if you're working at the same kitchen table as you were, why wouldn't you just take the $5,000? Whereas if you're in a situation where you are having to, take a journey, jump in a car every day and drive for 30 minutes, and you live near that area, that will, anchor you to that area. If you got another job and someone's offering you $5,000, but it meant having to travel across the entire city, you might be thinking to yourself, for $5,000, an extra hour in the car every day? No, thank you. And so now that hybrid work has happened, it's kind of changing the outlook for the market. Certainly the tech sector, they seem to have adopted this better than other sectors. If you're like an architectural firm or some sort of professional firm that deals with professionals, then you're not going to be really allowing people to work from home in great numbers, because a trainee coming out of college is not going to learn sitting at home on a Zoom call. They learn from being in the room with the more experienced people. They learn from listening to the conversations. If I pick up the phone and I'm having a conversation with a client, say the client is very unhappy about something, you're learning just from overhearing my conversation. How do I deal with how are my responses? What's my body language like? All of that is education for a graduate who is learning. You get none of that if you're working from home, and you can't train people. The idea is that they're picking this stuff up through osmosis, just through being there. Anyway, some more headlines. They're saying that the UK high street retailers are the big winners because of new rates revaluation. That's a thing that typically goes on every 5 or 10 years. They have a revaluation of commercial rates, and every single commercial property has to pay commercial rates. The stamp duty tweak has threatened a weakening housing market. That's just, there's going to be a lot more of these various statements that come out from a lot of the big housing agencies. And they're saying that UK social housing rents are set to rise by 7% next year. This is what's going on in the UK market. Let's have a look at the Irish market, which is certainly closer to home for me. And I've been looking at the headlines just today in the paper, and they're talking about the OECD, which is the organization of, I can't remember, economic developed countries or something like that. And it's basically all the largest developed economies in the world. And they are looking at what's going on in amongst all the developed kind of countries and developed industry and all of that kind of stuff. And it's a Paris-based agency, and what they are saying is that they're looking at possibly a 1 year long recession as the global economy is stagnating. Now that is not good news, obviously, for anybody. And they're saying that the persistent high inflation is what's driving this. And they're cutting global forecasts next year to 2.3%. That's down from 2.8%. Now that might sound like a very small amount, but when you take that's the globe. Here in Ireland, we will notice that on the ground, and you'll find that people have less spending money, there's less employment. Now, is it going to affect the housing market? that remains to be seen. And as I take you through this talk, you're going to see housing is where it's all at the moment. Just the focus is housing. Now, there has been an announcement by the European Union, and they're saying the ECB, which is the European Central Bank, and they're the organization that sets interest rates. They are saying that property markets may be at a turning point. Now, this is a worrying sort of thing for them to be coming out with, and they know that the housing market, property markets in general, but in particular the housing market, is very, very heavily correlated with interest rates. And so as you go up, like for every 1% an increase in interest rates, typically that will affect the housing market by about 10%. And that is a statistic. It doesn't necessarily ring through in the Irish market because of how badly we are out of kilter with the housing demand and things like that, or housing supply versus demand. But they are seeing a reversal in the region, in the whole of the EU. They're seeing a reversal in real estate markets. And this is something that they're concerned about because it could lead to bad debt and all of that. Yes, this tash is Movember. I don't like it. My wife hates it, and it's going to be gone in about 7 days' time. So next week you might still see it on me, but you certainly will not see it the week after. And but if you want to look me up, Gavin J. Gallagher in the Movember sort of fundraising page, and drop a few quid in there. Anyway, let's get on to the next one. Property price rises are to slow as interest rates increase. Now, the house prices in Ireland are they're just crazy. I mean, but it is down to the fact. I mean, this is there's a long story to this. If you go back to 2007, we were building 90,000 houses a year, and then in 2008, the world went through the global financial crash. And that totally decimated the Irish market. Both the construction sector and the housing sector were decimated. And in fact, it's not even correct to use the term decimate, because decimate is when, it dates back to Roman times, when if there was any kind of problem in an outpost of the Roman Empire would send in their soldiers and they would kill 1 in every 10 people. That was to decimate the town, and that would kind of put them all, the manners on them all, essentially. So the term comes from that. In the Irish construction sector between 2008 and 2012, what actually happened was 1 in every 2 jobs were lost as a result of the crash. So 50% of all construction jobs were lost. And what happened when that happened, there's no sitting at, you've been made redundant, you go out and look for another job and you'll get another job. Back then, it was absolutely impossible to get a job. So you were either satisfied with the idea of being long-term unemployed. And I had a few friends and college mates and stuff that were professionals, we'll say architects and things like that. And they decided that they didn't want to move to another country. They didn't want to do this. They were going to go home and they were going to batten down the hatches and they were going to become long-term unemployed until they got a job. And I think one of them was like 3 years or something like that unemployed. So not a good situation to be in, but you literally have to decide you're going to sell your house, you're going to up sticks, you're going to move to Australia or Canada or something like that. Not easy when you have children. Easier if you're a single person and you can just up sticks and go. But anyway, going back, so that's the long story. That's what happened. After that, in 2012, we were down to something like 8,000 housing units a year being built, which is 1/10 of what it was at. And it has been years trying to get a rebound. And because so many people moved abroad, because so many people left the market, what it actually did was it meant that the construction sector in general, the capacity of the sector is massively, massively smaller than what it used to be. And so even if if you were to sort of say, here's a magic box that money pumps out of, and there's no cost control regarding building houses, just build as many as you want, we wouldn't be able to build any more than we currently are. And that is because the construction sector is completely at capacity. It is constrained not by cost, but by capacity in terms of the numbers of people and all that. So we're in a situation where even if I said tomorrow, if I was starting a project tomorrow, big project, and I said, you know what, I'm going to go and hire 1,000 people. I don't care the cost. I'm going to bring 1,000 people into the country and they're going to work for me on this project, and that's how I'm going to kind of get around the delays and stuff. Where am I going to put them? There's no hotels available because of the refugee situation with Ukraine. Bed and breakfast all gone, housing completely gone. And are these people coming over as single people, or are they bringing families? Are they expecting schools and all that? So the system is at breaking point because of the fact that all of these people left in 2008, 2009, 2010. They haven't been able to come back. And if they wanted to come back now to a booming economy, they're going to come back and find that they can't get a home. They can't do anything. Last week, I mentioned that a friend of mine is an agent in Dublin, and he just listed an apartment, 2-bedroom apartment for rent in South Dublin. And he said in 1 hour, they got 600 inquiries for that apartment. And so think about that now, 600 people chasing one apartment. And when you hear that, you realize the difficulty and the problem that we have. And so property prices are not going to fall is the general view. It seems that we have, even though we're entering into a recession, even though interest rates are increasing, and what that normally would do would be to put a cap on the rate, the increases. And in fact, you would start to see falls in value. What is actually going to happen is that certain projects are going to fall off and not going to be viable any longer because construction prices have gone up, funding costs have gone up. And so the amount of profit that a developer can take out of the deal is gone. And so that project will be shelved. And they'll say, you know what, we'll wait until the prices come back down. We'll wait until, this project can wait until it is profitable, but we're not going to build something and lose money right from the word go. So that project is now shelved. What does that mean? That means that those houses or those apartments that were about to come onto the market are no longer going to come onto the market, which means what? It means that we are now in a situation that the housing market is actually going to get worse rather than better. The fact that we're going into a recession is actually going to worsen the housing crisis because you're going to have fewer projects coming on stream. Now, last week, I can remember there was a comment from one of you guys, and it was basically that, is it not a good thing that we're entering into a recession because it'll mean that prices come down and all that? And that is, it's a good question, and it is an assumption that does kind of sound logical and make sense. But look at it like this: you have a property that costs, like the average price of a house now in Dublin is like 800 grand or something. But let's use a kind of a normal price. Let's say 250 grand for a property. Okay. 250 grand. In a recession, typically that would fall in value. So maybe you go from 250 down to 200. So you've saved 50 grand. That sounds like a great day's work. The problem is that your interest rate, your borrowing rate has gone up in correlation with all of this. And so the 250 down to 200, but your interest rates that you're paying the mortgage on are now based on a higher level. And if they're based on a higher level, that means that you're actually no better off. You might be paying out less of a deposit at the outset, but your payments every month are going to become probably just as difficult as they were before, if not even more difficult, because they're going up at a higher rate. So that is one of the issues that we face. And so at the moment, what they're talking about, in the last 12 months, they said that there was something like 12% increase in housing prices. They're expecting that to fall back to maybe 6 or 8%. That's still growing at 6 or 8%. That is still a strong growing market versus a market that is kind of falling back. So I think that the housing market will continue to be a difficult place. And if you're trying to rent a place, you understand just how difficult it is. My friend who is in the business of renting property and stuff like that, he was saying that they have just so much difficulty at the moment because there's people that want to get out of the property, and they might have served notice that you're to leave the property. They can't get them out because they can't put somebody out on the street. What they can do is say, we need the property back. Can you please move to another property? And these guys agree, yes, we'll do that. We'll move out. As soon as we find an alternative solution, we'll go to it. And they can't get an alternative. And even this guy has said, I'll find you one, and he can't find one for them. So it's a massive problem at the moment. Let's go on to the next topic. So it's actually in the paper during the week, the highest average property price in Dublin now is at 880,000. And that is the Donnybrook Balls Bridge area. And these prices, Just imagine trying to afford that, you know. Now, they're saying that the housing spending is likely to miss the 4 billion target. The government have said that they would like to spend up to 4 billion a year on building houses, and that is both in 2022 and 2023. The problem is, even though they have this, you know, desire to spend this, they can't do it because the capacity of the construction sector is not there. So I see comments there. I'm going to get back to your comments in a little bit. I'm just going to finish reading through the headlines that I've got here, and then I'll deal with them. I see somebody talking about currently renting houses. Rents rise by a record of 14.1% annually on the back of extreme shortage of rental homes. So it's pretty much what I've been talking about, but it says here that there are fewer than 1,100 homes available to rent nationally on daft.ie in early November. And they're saying that the highest level of annual rent inflation recorded by their property website since 2006. So this is where you can see the wheels are coming off, basically, and that the market has just reached this point where it's almost completely broken. And what do you do when you're in a situation like this? Like, the government they're going to be highly focused on this because they're potentially going to lose the next general election over it. And so it's going to be one of these things. You're going to have somebody like Sinn Féin coming along saying, we'll fix this. Of course, it's a lot easier to say it than it is to actually do it. What are Sinn Féin going to do any differently than anyone else? The capacity of the construction sector is the problem. And so if you go and say, right, well, what we'll do is we're going to tax all the developers and force them to do this, what's that going to do? Developers, I'm a developer. I'm not going to go and do a project that is no longer financially viable. I'll just pull out of the project and I'll stick it. I'll put it on the market, sell it, let somebody else deal with it. Probably won't sell because everyone else is punching in the same figures as I'm punching in. And so this is a big issue, and one that's not going to be solved by, you know, politicians. I think the market just has to grow gradually, and it's a very difficult situation. They're saying here, so here's an interesting, okay, so two different headlines. And what they said was Dublin housing is severely unaffordable. That is coming from a think tank in the US called Demographia. Now, they're just saying that, you know, it's interesting to see this. They're coming in looking at all these kind of figures, and they're looking at the Dublin is now ranked at 51st out of least affordable cities out of 92 in the world. And like, to be way down there, that is not great, considering we're not one of these big, like, Chinese type cities or whatever. Having said that, the European Commission report came out during the week as well, and it says that housing in Ireland is not overvalued within the EU. And so it seems to be, like, they're talking about Dublin versus Ireland. Perhaps that's where the difference is, but it is interesting. They're talking about Pepper Finance increasing some of its Irish mortgage rates to 6.5%. So you're starting to see it now. People will start to feel the bite in their mortgages. And if you're paying mortgages, you're going to find that you're going to really start to notice it. And what this is going to do is people paying this extra, if you think about it, I'm a very natural talker. Well, thank you for the compliment. What you've got people out there that are paying diesel for their car or petrol for their car. Prices have gone through the roof in the last couple of years. In the last year or so, I've noticed it. When I'm filling up my car, it's so expensive. Going shopping in the grocery store, incredibly expensive. And so that's another one there. Say gas for your home or electricity for your home. All those prices gone up massively as well. So you're already looking at your paycheck, having less of your paycheck at the end of every month. Now, go and add to that the fact that either your rent is going up or your mortgage is going up. And what's that going to do? It's going to squeeze down the amount of available cash that you have. And if you're going to be in that situation, you're going to find, what are you going to do? It's disposable income is going to be prioritized. And you're going to say, right, what can I do without and what can I not do without? And something like perhaps, clothing, perhaps holidays, anything that's kind of like, fancy kind of luxury item, definitely going to be gone. And so you might find that people are spending an awful lot less, which will start to impact the rest of the economy. Now, interestingly enough, this is not Irish only situation. Across the UK, across the whole of Europe, everyone is paying higher interest rates and higher mortgages and stuff. And so in Spain, it's just been announced that the Spanish government has unveiled a package of measures aimed at providing relief to homeowners who are struggling with interest rate increases. Now, of course, the government in Spain is a left-wing government, and so they're quite socialist, and so that's one of the reasons why they're doing this. But it is interesting to see whether that's the kind of thing that you'll start to hear from the likes of Sinn Féin and stuff like that, because there is definitely this housing crisis. Like almost every headline I read is about housing, about some issue to do with housing. Either it's mortgage increases, or it's the lack of housing, or it's the cost of rent and the increases and all this. If you add all of this stuff together, you're looking at a situation where you're basically giving a big, huge stick to the politicians to kind of beat up the current government. And but like, I don't think anyone would actually be able to deal with this. This is actually not something that you fix in a short space of time. Certainly not. You couldn't fix this problem. If you had a bottomless pit of money, you couldn't fix this problem this year. You couldn't fix it next year. You're probably looking at a 10-year duration to actually fix this situation. 10 years, imagine that. Now, election cycles are only 4 years. So you're going to have somebody coming in and they're going to make all these promises. They're not going to fulfill those promises in the 4 years. And so at the end of the 4 years, they get voted out. Somebody else comes along. You've got to have some sort of, like, I imagine the only way to do it would be some sort of national unity government in order to try to kind of come to terms and sort of say, look, how are we going to fix this situation? Because we can't have us all competing with one another. We have to figure out a way to sort it out. Building upgrades for refugees. So if you're renting to refugees, I noticed the comment there about refugees. If you are building for refugees, you can now actually bypass the planning system. So upgrades to your property in order to facilitate additional refugees, if you're expanding it or whatever, you no longer need planning permission for that. Now, there will be some pushback against that. Mortgage rates rise 12% ahead of ECB hikes. So what's happening here, and this is kind of typical, is that the banks, instead of, their rates have gone up by, say, 0.25%. Instead of adding 0.25% to everyone's mortgages, so they just pass it on, what they're doing is they're adding that amount plus a little bit extra as well. So they're typically, this is typical of banks, a little bit greedy. Let's go and increase the rates, and everyone's going to know that we have to increase the rates because of the ECB. But the reality is they're tweaking it just a little bit more than they need to in order to drive up profitability. And an interesting headline I saw during the week is that new build apartments are being rented out on Air BNB at the moment at $5,900 a month. Now, this is, I believe it's just one apartment. So it may just be that because of that price, it grabbed the headlines, but that person is probably going to find themselves in a bit of a spot of bother, because I don't think that has planning permission to do that. Getting on to, we're near the end of the slides, and then I'm going to deal with all of your questions. By the way, slides, just in case you're wondering, when I talk about slides, you guys looking in on TikTok, if you're wondering, I have, this is a live stream over on YouTube where you can actually see the slides that I'm referring to. And so if you're interested in just seeing what I'm talking about, that's where you can go. You can go and subscribe there. Anyway, once again, we're talking about the housing situation. We're talking about how housing is basically where all of the news is at the moment. And what we have is the TD, Darragh O'Brien, is coming under criticism because of the housing situation. And I mean, of course, but I don't think anyone could go in there and fix this situation. In addition to that, and this is another headline, we see that there's local residents in Cork getting very, very unhappy with the fact that an entire Cork estate has been bought by the local authority in order to put it out there in their housing list. And it means that people who wanted to live in that area and saw housing development being built and thought, oh, great, we can actually live, we can go move closer to home or move closer to the parents or whatever it is. Those people are actually being isolated. They're being locked out of the market by the local authority coming in and saying, you're building 60 houses, we'll buy every single one of them off you. And so it's, you can imagine how that makes people feel who've been trying to get into the local market. And again, housing starting to fall in October. So the output of new homes is well short of the target that the government had set for itself. They had hoped to build 33,000 homes this year. Now, if you remember back to what I said about 20 minutes ago, I was talking about the fact that in 2008, we were doing 90,000 homes a year. And this was at a time when we didn't really need them, but it was being driven by the credit bubble. Now we are in a situation where it's absolutely essential to build houses. And the most we have capacity for is 33,000. And that's with every single sector, every single worker in the country, basically building houses. Not enough. We need to bring in tens of thousands more builders back into the country. How do we do that, though? This is the problem, is that the demographics of the country over the last 10 years, what has happened is the increase in the population, like the birth and all that kind of stuff. You've got teenagers in the last 10 years that have become in their mid-20s, and they've gone out and they've started to buy properties and things like that. You've got people that have moved back to the country, they've rented houses. And so there's no longer the capacity there for all of these people that left the market to actually come in and start to live here in the market. If you could free up, say, 20,000 homes and just put them there, say, look, here's 20,000 homes immediately available, you would be able to bring in 20,000 construction workers. Those 20,000 construction workers could immediately get to work on this market. But the problem is we have nothing. Now, this is why we're starting to see pushback on the refugee crisis. Now, Ukraine, the situation over there is a humanitarian disaster. Russia, like Putin, is just such an animal to be blasting now all of the power plants and trying to destroy all the power infrastructure so everyone's going to freeze to death during the wintertime. He's doing that. People are just leaving. And it is our kind of moral duty to go and help these people, because if you only go back about 150 years, the Irish were the ones that were actually having to go as refugees because of the famine. And so we ended up pulling it, going to the UK, going to the US in our millions. And so we naturally feel some sort of, association with this. And so this is why it is right that we are welcoming these people in, but you can see how we're in a situation where it's just making matters far, far worse. Last couple of slides talking about the commercial property sector. So the area that I'm most focused on is the commercial sector, and Kildare Village is actually losing tenants at the moment. There has been an occupancy slump. So those of you who know Kildare Village, it's one of those places where you can go and buy the likes of Boss and Hugo, all of those kind of like fancy brands. What they do is those fancy brands, we'll call them the luxury brands like Gucci and stuff, they will never put an item on sale inside their store. What they instead do is they take everything that didn't sell and they send it to the outlet store where they have a Boss outlet store, and they'll sell it cheap there. But you'll never see, as you're walking by the likes of a Boss or a Louis Vuitton store or something like that, you'll never see for sale. That doesn't happen in the luxury sector. What they do is they take all the stock from last year, whatever, and they'll send it to the discount outlet store. And then 8 million has been earmarked for the redevelopment of the area between Dawson Street and Grafton Street. Like they're always up doing up these streets, and it's nice to see. But it's interesting to see how they're doing up the city centre streets. But you've got places like Kildare Village actually losing tenants. And an interesting final kind of point I was looking at the headlines there today in the commercial property sector in the Irish Times, and they're saying that there's a deal for a shopping centre in Dundalk, and this scheme was bought for 44.5 million back in 2004, and they're currently trying to sell it for 30 million. So these guys are looking like they've lost 15 million. Now, it is not often that Kennedy Wilson, which is the big fund that came in and bought up half of the Irish market, and they made millions in the like billions would be a closer accurate amount. And they have actually, they're in a situation now where they're actually going to take a 15 million bath on this particular investment. And then finally, South Dublin investment sells for 56% above its guide price. Now, this is not typical, but probably what you're going to find is that there is some special interested party looking at that particular. Normally, if you put something up for sale and it goes for that much over, usually the person who's buying it is there for a very, very specific reason. And that is my slides. I'm going to get into questions now. And what I do notice, there's quite a few questions in the chat about, do I see property prices falling? It depends what you're specifically asking about. If it's property prices, housing property prices, possibly not. If you're talking about commercial property prices, I would say almost definitely yes. I'm going to go and scroll back to the beginning and just have a look at some of these comments. So, do you think we are Finland? Just their value changes are 20 years ahead of ours. I don't know enough about the Finnish market to actually know what that about that. So, big pullback in Q2 next year. I've actually heard that as well. And so we shall be interesting. Usually 9 to 12 month lag, commercial property down 30 to 40%. I've been hearing something kind of not far off that. So I think Joe, Murta, I think you're probably spot on the money there. And I do think I actually have heard very, very similar numbers myself in private briefings that I've had. Is that Tash for November or just for fun? You don't think I'd grow this hedgehog like for fun. This is the most annoying thing. I hate it. I can't wait to get rid of it. But I did sign up for November. And I said, it's the first time I've ever grown a Tash. And I decided, let's give it a shot. And anyway, can't wait to get rid of it. 7 days from now, if off it comes. But I will put if you want to go and contribute to my Movember page, you'll find it over in Movember, just Gavin J. Gallagher. Now, let's have a look. What does it say? Residential at higher going to have a big correction. This is fact, not fiction. I don't think so. This is one of the issues that we have out there. You've got the market normally would behave a certain way. Yes. If you've got interest rates that are shooting up the way they're shooting up, then you would say, absolutely, the market is going to fall in value. The problem is that you've got rental property. You've got, as I mentioned earlier, 600 people inquiring within an hour for one apartment in South Dublin. And when you've got that kind of demand, then that puts a floor on the amount that things can fall. And so I don't think we are in a normal market that would behave in a normal economic way. If you look at economics, there's supply, there's demand, and there's an imbalance there. And that tension, if you've got more demand than you have supply, then there'll always be a rise in prices. If you've got demand falling below supply and building. So we have a massive capacity problem in construction, and we have a huge demand problem that we can't get enough property to actually service the demand. At the moment, we're targeting 33,000 houses a year. We're not even achieving that, but let's say we did achieve it. That is still something they're saying that we would need to be doing between 50 and 70,000 a year to meet current demand. So if we're less than 50% of current demand, what does that mean? It means that when you go out there and supply the 33,000, let's assume we hit our targets, you're still 30,000 short. That's this year. Next year, you're going to do another 30,000, but you're still 30,000 short. So it's called a structural shortage. And so it means that every year you go forward, you build 30,000, all you're doing is playing catch up. And you're going to be playing catch up probably for the next decade, if not more. And the only thing that can happen is that gradually the construction sector will add more jobs. People will find a home. People will, kids will leave school and join the construction sector. Whatever it will, the construction sector will gradually grow larger and a greater capacity will be there. But you can't fix this in a day. If you were, there is enough demand out there to build 50,000 homes. Why are we not building 50,000 homes? There's plenty of money to build 50,000 homes. There's plenty of demand to build 50,000 homes. There's plenty of land to build 50,000 homes. Capacity is the issue. And there you go. So I don't think that there will be a correction because of that. I think it's going to put a floor on it. Now, I do think certain sectors of the market could fall, and that would not be unusual. Going to be honest, I'm actually pursuing a pilot's license instead of a home. Better value. Yeah. I think, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But you're going to find that you struggle to rent a property unless you're living at home with your parents, which, a lot of people do. And there's nothing wrong with that. So let me get on to the next thing. Is there any comments in here? We have a great video. Love the clippings from the papers. Great. Stock market, black swan event, Q2. It's funny. A few people are talking about Q2 2023. Q2 2023, we'll have to wait and see. I've heard a lot about that. So it's interesting. Currently own 2 houses that I'm renting. Better to buy through limited or in the future or in general. Okay, this is funny. I was talking about this last night with, I have a little private mastermind that I coach, and those guys were asking exactly this question. And we were talking about, should you buy in a limited company or should you buy in your personal name? And it all depends on where your income is coming from, what your long-term plans are, what are you trying to do with the money. If you have a company that is earning money and you want to go and take some of that money and put it straight into property, what you probably should do is set up a separate investment company. And this could be like a sister company. So you have one that trades and that earns money, and then you send those profits across to this other one. If you pay yourself a dividend, you're going to lose 50% on tax. And so that doesn't really work very, very well. So it's far better off if you've got limited company to keep it in that. Having said that, if you already have 2 houses in your personal name and you're in a situation where you can add value to them, let's say you decide to extend a house. So what a lot of my clients are looking at the moment, my coaching kind of guys, what they're looking at is they will take property that's say 3-bedroom and they'll extend it out the rear so it turns it into say a 5-bedroom. Then they might go up into the attic and they might convert the attic so it becomes a 6-bedroom. Now that 3-bedroom to become 6-bedroom, and what you do is you turn it into a HMO, a house of multiple occupancy. HMO is where it's all at now, and what people are doing is they rent out each room at say 600 a month, 700 a month, whatever it is you can achieve. And if it's got an ensuite bathroom, if it's like a private ensuite, you're going to get more than if it's shared toilets. If you've got a lot of my guys, what they've done is they put a little microwave in and a little mini fridge, so you're kind of self-contained. But they will have a common area kitchen downstairs that if you want to go and cook a meal, you can go down and use the cooker. But a lot of people, they're getting their meals in their place of work. So you've got an office canteen. You go in, get your breakfast, get your lunch, get your dinner, just arrive home and watch TV, microwave something if you want to click on, make yourself a cup of coffee or whatever. That is the way a lot of people are doing it. And so instead of getting 2,500 a month from a family for a 3-bed, you could be getting 5,000 to 6,000 a month from a HMO. And now there are more services, it's more hassle, but some people I know are doing it and they're doing it very effectively. And the great thing about this extra, like the 5,000 a month that's coming out, your mortgage will still be probably 1,500. So if you were buying it and paying a mortgage of 1,500 a month and having 1,000 of extra cash, now you'll have 4,000 or 5,000 of extra cash, and that can then go and be plowed into another property, and you do it again, and you recycle and you keep on doing it. One of the guys that I know has done this now multiple times. He started at no money, started out as an apprentice electrician, and now he has more than 80 tenants paying him every month in a similar kind of a way. So he's probably bringing in 50,000 a month in income. It's a very nice position to be in, and he's only in his 30s. And so it just shows it is possible, but you do have to be very smart about it, and you have to be quite disciplined. Next question. So limited company, it has all of these issues. Have I fully answered that? I probably haven't fully answered it. One of the problems with doing it in a limited company is that if you need this money, say you decide you want to buy a home in a couple of years' time and you want to go and take out a deposit of say 200,000. So if it's in that limited company, when you decide to take that money out, you're going to have to go, and if you need 200 grand, you'll have to pay yourself a dividend of 400 grand and take 200 grand of tax, give it to the taxman and take the rest out. That'll be your 200. So it's very tax inefficient. Whereas if it's in your personal name, you'll obviously have capital gains tax to pay, but you won't have it in the company and then again on the payout to yourself. So that's why I say it all depends. What do you need it for? If you need the cash, like if you're building a big, say a passive income and you want to have it years into the future, then leave it in a company, because you'll just keep on growing it bigger and bigger, and maybe you can turn it into you can divert some of the money into a pension fund or whatever. Flooding of the country with refugees is the problem. No mainstream party will address. yeah, it's very hard to see a situation where we say no more refugees. I know we're in a situation where we have a housing crisis, but this country was a country of like we have a diaspora in the US of 40 million people. Why is that? Because back in 1847, 1 million people jumped on a boat and sailed to America as refugees. And they were basically economic famine refugees. And so it's hard for us now to turn around and say, you guys can't get back into the country because now we have our own problems, because back then we were treated like dogs. When you arrived off a boat from Ireland into America or the UK, and they had signs on the window saying, no dogs or I think the awful thing was no blacks, no Irish, no dogs. And that was the kind of, the prejudice that we faced as a country back in those days. So I think we have like a historic moral objective there that we have to kind of keep on supporting people. I work at a large construction company. We have had 2 large BTR projects shelved in the last 4 months. Yeah, buy to rent. Those are the big projects. I've been talking about this actually in my podcast. I have a podcast called Behind the Facade. Okay, you'll find it in it's on YouTube, and it's also in iTunes, all those kind of typical places. But what I said was that the housing crisis is going to get worse. And the reason that I said that was because with interest rates going up and with construction prices going up, what it's done is it's put this huge pressure on the big developers of these big these buy to rent projects. And the reason is that the big funds that were buying this, so what was happening was, let's say you're building 100 apartments, you would go and you would put it in the market. You go to an agent, you'd say, I have 100 apartments coming to the market, find me a buyer. And they would go off, they would talk to these big funds, and the fund would say, I'll buy 100 Irish apartments, that'll be rented. And they might put a price of, say, 40 million on the project or something like that. And you come back to me and you sort of say, we've got a guy that'll buy for 40 million. And I'll be doing my calculations. Well, I think I can fund this entire project for maybe 35, and that leaves a 5 million profit for me. Happy days, let's take that. So you agreed to sell for 40 million. Now all of a sudden funding costs have gone up. So maybe instead of making 5 million, you're now only going to make 4 million or 3.5 million. Now, construction costs have gone up massively in the last 6 months. And so what's happened is, they're talking about 25% inflation in the construction sector. And you're looking at your 2.5 million profit that was yours is now being evaporated by that increase. And you could have a situation where it costs you 42 million to build this apartment development and give it to some guy who's going to pay you 40 for it. So you can see why projects are getting shelved. They're getting shelved because it no longer makes any sense. Even if you thought you could make money, you're not going to get into a situation where you're leaving it that tight. If you can make a small profit, there's just too much uncertainty out there. You're going to shelve the project rather than take that risk. Let's have a look at some more questions. If you're on a tracker mortgage, should you keep it? I would say anything that tracks the floating rate is going to continue to go up. So you want to be careful. I mean, I don't want to give anyone advice, but I do think that rates are going to continue to creep up for the next couple of years. Are electric cars a good investment? I think they are. The way it's going, I think cars in general tend not to be good investments. So let's put the let's leave that aside. Okay, should you go out and buy a new car? Definitely don't go out and buy yourself a diesel or a new diesel car, because I think those are going to suddenly lose their value very, very quickly when in a couple of years' time, everyone's going to be looking at electric cars. Now, if you go and buy an electric car today, the problem is the cost of electric cars is astronomical. And because of that, there is, there's a chance that those will fall back in value as well. So it's going to be interesting to see. I think as it becomes adopted, as electric cars become more and more widely adopted, the price will probably fall. And when the price falls, then obviously people will be able to go out and buy a new model for cheaper. So I think all cars will fall in value. But I do think that the likes of diesel is going to collapse in value because people just won't want a diesel in a couple of years' time. Getting into the property market from scratch means you're just volunteering to pay past debt. Yeah, there is some issues there. We are paying for the COVID lockdowns, and that money the government printed at the time. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. And the thing is it's hard to kind of say what should you. Let me just see. I just did something there, and it's showing me all of these. Okay, so I can actually see. This is much better. I'm actually able to read the comments now. So, do I speak English? That's very cheeky. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. So, getting into the property market, the COVID lockdowns. Yeah, you have to think back though to the situation. Okay, the COVID lockdowns at the time, what we were in a situation is everyone was locked down. We were told that you couldn't go more than 2 kilometers outside of this circle around your house. And so people were going to lose their jobs, businesses were going to collapse, everything like that. So what was the government going to do? Was it just going to allow tens of thousands of people to lose their jobs and end up looking to go in the dole? Or were they going to support them? The other thing is were they going to go and say to all the people that were running businesses like pubs and hotels and all that, sorry, you're out of business, you can go and close down your business, all that investment that you paid for, creating the pub and all that, that's just to be lost. So you can understand why the government were forced to do what they had to do. And we didn't, nobody really knew what was going on. So it's very easy to blame retrospectively, but if you were in that situation, you're saying, God, we're going to have an absolute total economic meltdown unless we do something to kind of prop up the market for the next couple of months. At the time, they thought that I remember very, very clearly when the lockdown came in around about St. Patrick's Day, 2020. And I can remember we all reckoned that by June or July, everything would be back to normal. And another year and a half went by before things were back to normal. Now, getting on to the next one. Let me see. Ask Michael O'Leary to run this company, this country, and get rid of the rest of them. Yeah, I can see some value in that. Shut Air BNB down through massive tax increases and long-term. Yeah, a lot of stuff here. Do I speak English? Okay, well, thank you for that. The company, the problem is people like you who are capitalizing on the property market are running the show. Well, people are entitled to their opinion, but I'm trying to be helpful here. There are thousands of homes in each borough which are empty. I don't think there are thousands of homes in lying around. Certainly not in the Irish market. It depends what country you're in. If you're in the UK or something like that, maybe it's different. But here in Ireland, I don't know of very much property lying around. It's it's our duty to look after our own first. There is a little bit of that, yeah. But Irish were treated like dirt. Yeah, that's true. Do you see house prices falling? So I've already cleared that. I don't think so. How many points did you get in your leaving cert? Did I get? Let's think back. Okay, so first of all, I have a teenage daughter who is in the middle of doing her leaving cert, and so I know the point system is different to how it was back in my day. Back in my day, the maximum, if you got A's in every single subject, you would get 30 points, and if you got 2 extra points for doing honors maths, so you could get 32 points was the maximum that you could get. That's the equivalent of getting whatever 600 and something points nowadays. I think I got 18 or 20 points or something like that. So I was not a great student, I have to say. I couldn't speak Irish, and I did very badly in French, so those let me down. The prices are propped up by scarcity. Exactly, scarcity created from knee-jerk credit controls. Scarcity is not really caused by knee-jerk credit controls. Scarcity is, if you go back to 2008, it's the fact that the global financial crisis affected the Irish market. It basically affected us worse than almost any person in the world, any country in the world. And so you're in a situation where you've got a construction sector that simply cannot deal with the capacity that is expected of it. And you can't bring in an extra 20,000 people, because where are you going to house them? And so that's it. What you might kind of sort of say, oh, well, the Ukrainian refugee crisis, that's going to be good because you're going to have all this labor that we can send into the market. Most of those are women and children. The men are not allowed to leave because they have to fight in the war. I see a comment here, 166,000 empty homes in Ireland. I don't know, is that correct? I don't think so. I can't imagine they're just property sitting there empty, but I stand to be corrected. It's not a problem with construction. It's a problem with giving access to credit for the average Joe. I don't think so. I have to say, like, if every single person, if they were to reduce the amount of, if you were to sort of say, okay, let's remove the credit control, like the mortgage rules that are there in the central bank. You've got mortgage rules, and the most that you can borrow it's about to go up to 4 times your income, but it was 3.5 times your income for the last 10 years or so. If you were to say, we're going to do away with that, you can buy whatever you want, all that would do is put a load of people out there bidding against one another, and that would drive up property prices even higher. And the problem isn't that people are out there and they want to buy, but they're not able to afford it. It's that there's not enough homes to go around. 60K short in 2 years. Yeah. Second properties should be taxed into unaffordability. I do see some value in that, all right, but like if you consider it like this, there's an awful lot of people that would have houses, say, on a beach or something like that, or down in Wexford or something like that, and then they live in Dublin. Now, how many people want to live in Dublin? Like it's obviously the capital city. It's where all the employment is. So you're going to have a lot of issues there. Whereas when you are a lot of people wanting to live there, if you've got a house on a beach in Wexford or it's in a very rural area, you can't see that there'd be that much demand for that. And people have to be able to get to and from work and things like that. So the problem isn't just simply vacant houses in rural parts of the country. It's the fact that there isn't enough where they need to be. I'm about to collect keys from my second rental property. Can't wait. Well done. Hello from Iceland. Work at the internet revenue here. I see somebody asking questions. Right, guys, look, I've got 5 minutes left, so I'm going to try and find a question to kind of finish it out. Bought a house in February. Am I going to lose money in the long run? No, I don't believe so. Housing is long-term, though. If you think you're going to flip the property in the next 12 months or so, I think you're going to be disappointed. But if you're going to hold it like long-term, my first property I bought, it's coming up next May. It'll be 30 years since I bought my first property. And when I bought my first property, I paid 85,000 Irish pounds for it, which by the standard using the euro rate exchange and stuff, I think that would probably be about 100,000 euro. So 100,000 euro back in 1993. And a guy was paying me rent, and the guy was paying me rent I think 22 or 20, let me see, what was it? It was, 22,000 a year in rent I was getting for about 20 years from this guy. And he paid me over that period of time almost 4 times what I bought the house for. And so at the end of me holding this property for like 24 years or something like that, I had a property that I paid 100,000 for. I had received about 400 grand in income from the tenant over that period of time. And then when I decided to sell the house, I sold it for maybe 5 times what I paid for it. And so you can see how property over the long term really, really works. But people get into property sometimes because they want to make this quick flip. And what they want to do, buy the property, do it up, sell it, make a 30% profit. And then that's, cash to go out and enjoy and go on nice holidays and things like that. If that's your plan, then that's a lifestyle decision, and that's not really a business decision. And I think it might work in it for a short period of time, and it could be great, but it's not going to be sustainable long term. I see I'm not going to be renting, so at least my money is not going down the drain. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, people have different views on rent and stuff like that. Given the tension between property owners and tenants in society, do I see a midpoint and a way forward? I don't know. It's very, very difficult. Like, you become when the government starts to mess with the market dynamics, when they sort of bring in rules and stuff like that, that often has unintended consequences. And so what we've seen before, people bring in rent control, and suddenly there's all these kind of fiddles around in order to try to kind of change the way the market is operates, and you'll have guys that find tweaks that can actually like sidestep it, and you'll find that there's people living in the same property for 20 years paying like, you know, €50 a month or something like that. There's all sorts of little sort of tweaks that have been brought in over the years that have been abused. And you also get people that, you know, like the mafia get involved, and they start kind of like taking you. I can remember in America, they brought in rent control properties and stuff like that. And the mob used to come around and get collection money, or what is it, protection money from people. And just because they know that they can afford it, like that they're living in this property and they can't afford to move out of the property, because if they move out of the property, they'll have to pay like $1,000 a month instead of the 50 or whatever. You need somewhere to live. Okay, Gavin, I'm 25 and my partner can only afford an apartment, both in good jobs. Is it a good idea? It depends really, like it's a difficult one. What are your long-term objectives? At 25, you're only at the beginning of your career. You might decide that you want to kind of go abroad. You might decide that you want to relocate to another job. It's sometimes, I mean, what are the options open at the moment? The rental market is a complete disaster at the moment. So you're going to find it very hard to rent a place. So maybe buying something is the solution. But when you're young, you might find that you're only looking ahead the next couple of years, but you've got like years and years ahead of you in terms of career and stuff like that. So the thing to do is just whenever you're buying something like a home and stuff like that, think long-term, don't think short-term. Problem is there's not enough income to cover a mortgage, according to the banks. That's one of the problems that we have out there at the moment. And then this is the final one, guys. It's just gone 2 o'clock, so I'm going to be finishing up now. What is the smallest amount you would take from someone as an investment for a housing development? Well, do I need an investor? That's one of the things. To answer that question, I think what you'd be far better off doing is going and having a look at Property Bridges. And that is an online peer-to-peer lending platform. And what they do is they will have builders out there that want to raise money. And I think probably for as low as $5,000, you can invest in a project. Now, you're not going to be earning a piece of the profit, but you will get a return on your investment. It's morally bankrupt to take the majority of people's salaries and keep them in a rent trap. Yeah, but how do you fix that? Like, I mean, making statements like that, you know, everyone's entitled to their opinion and all that kind of stuff, but how do you fix it? You know, there's not a way to go out and fix these problems. There's not a simple way anyway. You go out and say, okay, the government should go out and build tens of thousands of properties. Where's the construction workers going to come to actually do that? They want people to be renting for the rest of their lives. I don't think they do. I think this is like the political situation is that the government will likely fall over can I say the name of that investment service again? Yes, it is called propertybridges.com, I think it is. Property Bridges, like a bridge as in crossing a river, bridges. But like the government does not want, like the government wants the housing crisis to be fixed. That's the bottom line. The problem is it can't be fixed. And the reason it can't be fixed is because 2008 happened. And when 2008 happened, that's it. Game over. And so anyway, look, guys, I hope you've enjoyed. I hope you found this useful. I've got to get back to work. The reality is I have this podcast. It's called Behind the Facade. Go and check it out. It's on YouTube if you want to look at it. I do the videos there, but I also have audio only in iTunes and all that kind of stuff. So that's Behind the Facade. And this live stream, you guys looking in through TikTok, this live stream goes out on YouTube. I have a personal YouTube channel called Gavin J. Gallagher on real estate. So just type in Gavin J. Gallagher in YouTube and you'll find me. Talk to you guys next week. It's been really good chatting with you all. And for those of you joining, I'm sorry that I have to end the stream now, but I hope you've enjoyed.